Cows, nature's greatest gift to humanity. But if there's anything better than a bovine face staring at you with an equal mix of sadness and bewilderment in the morning, it's gotta be a cup of fresh milk straight from the cow's udder. But in these modern fast times of interstate commuting and millennial tweets, it's not always practical to keep a cow in your living room. But what if I told you that there's a way to simulate the experience of having fresh milk in your trusty cup of joe? Introducing the Utterly Fresh-O-Matic. Simply part the entrance flap and pour your fridge milk into the Fresh-O-Matic container, cleverly designed over a period of years that's way too long by our team of scientists. And now you're ready for the best milk in your cup of coffee. A City Slicker can. It doesn't work. Herding cattle is not a theme that anyone's asked for, but Great Western Trail gets away with it. And that's because it might just be one of the best strategic games of this year. And that's because it comes from none other than Alexander Pfister, the designer of Mombasa, which was our runner-up game of the year for 2015. Will Great Western Trail live up to its expectations? Or will the deck-building element sour it, in my opinion? We'll never know.
Actually, we will. That's what this video is about.
All right then. Cup of tea, Elaine.
Ooh, good, jolly good cup of tea.
Cup of tea then. All right. In Great Western Trail, you're a cowboy, and on a steel horse you ride. You're not really wanted, neither dead or alive. You're just delivering cows to Kansas City. Like any good old Eurogame set in the American West, you're trying to score points because we all know that cowboys often end their lives right smack dab bang in the middle of town square with that slip of victory points in their hands at the ready. Here's the thing, ideally I would explain to you right now all the ways you score points in Great Western Trail, but frankly, explaining relativity would be easier, or teaching you the basic concepts of ancient Hebrew. Instead, I'm going to try and give you a framework of what it is that Great Western Trail does, because it is one heavy ball of chili of a game. Through the course of Great Western Trail, you will unironically be traveling across a trail, stopping at various points and eventually reaching Kansas City with a number of cows in your hand. And when you reach Kansas City, you will make a delivery. Now, ideally, you'll want cows that are of different types, because cows of the same type don't actually score you additional points. Then you will be able to get some money depending on how good your hand was, and also remove one of these pips from your player board and put them onto one of the stations, either scoring you points or potentially, depending on how bad your hand was, even losing them. But as these things often are, it's not so much the delivery that counts, it's how you get there. On your turn, you will get a number of steps, and you can use these steps to move your cowboy man across the board to various locations. Whatever location you stop on will let you do a certain action that's printed on it, or even multiple actions. For example, this location will let you build a building, and when you build a building, you take one of your special buildings and put it anywhere on the board. Now, that's an action that is exclusively available just to you, but also imposes an extra step onto your opponents, making it harder for them to travel. You can also move your move-filled train onto new pastures, and when you reach certain spaces, you will be able to do a station upgrade. Station upgrades are basically taking a pip off your player board, again unlocking an extra action or extra ability that you didn't have, but also score you victory points at the end of the game. Finally, you can improve your hand by buying one of these better, faster, harder, stronger cows, and they are cows with higher points values, but also with victory points printed on them. These cows will let you do better deliveries once you reach Kansas City, get more money, and finally unlock better slots on your player board. And you can also buy staff. Now, staff doesn't do anything immediately necessarily, but they will improve the actions that you have, making them either cheaper or somehow more profitable, or just maybe better. What makes Great Western Trail really crunchy is that when your turn comes up and you're trying to figure out where to actually move within your reach, you're not just figuring out what action you're going to be doing, you're figuring out whether you want to do an auxiliary action instead. See, the main actions in the game are engine building actions, which increase your ability to do things better, whereas auxiliary actions are actions that often revolve around mitigating the rubbish in your hand. So if your hand is full of jerseys, you don't necessarily want to turn that in and want to make it better. So you might do the auxiliary action of drawing a card and discarding one, meaning that then when you turn them in, you can get a better station. There's too many cows in this game. So what stops me from moving onto every single location on the game board and doing every action possible? Well, every time somebody reaches Kansas City, they will put out new workers onto this track, and that will immediately advance the game clock. So let's say I have these cards in my hand, and what I want to do before I hand them in is go here and buy myself a new cowboy. Well, a new cowboy in that case would cost me $6, but I only have 4 available to me. However, this action also lets me discard a Guernsey card from my hand and gain $2, and I will redraw a card at the end of that turn. The problem is knowing really what's in your discard pile and figuring out what's left in your deck. So if I know that all my deck has left in it is jerseys, I might not want to go for that cowboy and simply go straight on to Kansas City. And then there's this train track, which is an odd little thing. You see, because your train always keeps moving forward. It never really comes back to pick up the cows that you deliver to Kansas City. It just ever so slightly convulses backwards every so often. But here's the thing, I think what it's supposed to represent thematically is not so much a single train moving forward, but your railways expands. The further your network is reached, the less of a penalty you have to pay when eventually you do deliver cows that are supposed to go a long distance. But thematically, this can be unintentionally quite funny. Like in any other deck building game, you want to remove cards from your deck, from the game, to make your deck more thinner and more manageable. You want to do that because the cards you start with are a bit rubbish, so you want to get rid of them, so not only that your deck is more manageable, but so that you increase the chance of drawing good cards and decrease the chance of drawing bad ones. Here's the thing though, whilst in other deck building games deck thinning is a no-brainer, in Great Western Trail it comes with a great counterbalance, so deck thinning becomes less of a given and more of a choice. Every time you want to remove cards from your game, you have to move your train backwards. So in the very first game I played, my train kind of never left Kansas City, yet thematically I still kept delivering cows to it and still kept getting paid. And the cows just stay there, lounging in the train, wondering if they're in Kansas anymore.
And now for an educational intermission from Elaine.
One thing that gets me really excited in games is when they have an educational element, and this game certainly does. It teaches you about cows, like the Jersey, the Texas Longhorn, the West Highland, the Ayrshire, the Black Angus, the Dutch Belt, the Holstein, the Jersey, the West Highland again, which is very useful if you're ever on a game show about cows. Now, interestingly, this game does not feature the wonderful bovine creatures of Alderney and Sark, which is my main criticism.
This concludes the educational intermission from Elaine.
Okay, let's be honest here, I don't like deck builders. I never feel challenged by the decisions, and the randomness of card draw leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And whilst I never thought I would be disappointed by an Alexander Pfister game, I did feel worried, and my first game did nothing to assuage my fears. I was drawing badly every so often, and my opponents weren't, and I thought, look, if I just drawn the right cards at that one particular time, my game could have gone a lot better. And this was me trying to remove as many cards from my deck as possible. However, there's something to be said about managing your deck in Great Western Trail, knowing when to draw cards, knowing when to discard cards. And in my second playthrough, I have found that you can predict the outcome of your final hand, and there's a wonderful feeling as well of uncertainty and satisfaction when you edge your little man into Kansas City and lay out a perfect 18 and say, read 'em and weep, boys. So well done, Alexander Pfister. You have done the impossible. You have made me like a deck building game. And now I will eat my hat. I can't swallow it. Oh, but boys and girls, we aren't even close to being done yet. See, when you first play Great Western Trail, on your first playthrough, you'll often feel like you're playing solitaire because you're trying to wrap your head around and take this game by the horns whilst you're figuring out all the strategies available to you. But once you've got an inkling and kind of figure out how the game flows, you'll find that Great Western Trail has an amazingly tactical element to it. There are a lot of tiles on the board, and some of these are buildings, and some of these are your buildings, and some of these are your opponent's buildings. And there are also different kind of tiles called either hazards or TP tiles, which I guess is a way of the art department figuring out how to represent making deals with Native Americans. But the thing you should notice is the hand that's printed on these buildings. See, every time you get a turn, you get a number of steps, and moving a step is moving through any of these tiles. But if your opponent lands on one of your buildings or passes through them that has one of your hands on it, they'll have to pay you money from their account to your account. However, if they pass through neutral tiles that have hands printed on them, such as these hazard tiles, they will have to pay money to the bank. So when you place your buildings, you want to place it in such a way that they will decide, I think it's more profitable for me to give EFCA money rather than to give more money to the bank. But then there are buildings like this, which basically give you $2 for every building you have built on the board that is in a forest space. So if someone builds that building, you're already kind of thinking to yourself, hey, I want to deny them as many forest spaces as possible, so I should probably build on forest spaces as well, whether I'm going to profiteer from that or not. There is a lot to consider when you play Great Western Trail, especially because if there is a route that goes through these hazard tiles, you can build a building at the end of them, and then when you land on it, you will get extra actions, extra bonuses. And then of course you can clear these tiles, and you can clear the hazard tiles for victory points, or you can clear the TP tiles for money. But that doesn't mean, if you're not tactically minded, that you will not enjoy this game. If your group doesn't like tactics, there is so much scope, and this game is so vast that you can just play that solitaire game of Great Western Trail and enjoy that pure Euro experience. There's so much in it that you can do anything. The question stands, is Great Western Trail better than Mombasa? No, not to me. But that's like saying I like Sgt. Pepper less than I like Rubber Soul. Both are great, shining examples of their craft, and really, as to which one you like better is just a matter of personal taste. Still, I think there's something to be said about the unified, holistic feeling. It's like the Dirk Gently's detective agency of board games. But in Great Western Trail, there is a lot of hidden depth to plumb. Let me tell you about these buildings. See, right now, me and my group, we think these buildings are the thing that is the most important thing in the game, and you must watch what you're building and your opponents are building. A couple of games ago, we were thinking that if you have a good hand, you must turn in as soon as possible. And now we think actually turn-ins aren't even that important. And I think that in a couple of games, we'll be thinking something else entirely. Especially, I didn't even mention there's a whole second set of buildings in Mombasa. And there's a whole objectives deck that can score you extra points. There's just so much to go into. I think it's one of those games that will astound players for a long time, and maybe even rival Terra Mystica in how much people are going to get obsessed over how best to play this game. So if Mombasa is Empire Strikes Back, then this makes it A New Hope, which makes Isle of Skye, the Return of the Jedi, and Broom Service, that weird Ewok cartoon from the 80s, and oh my goods, the Unspoken Christmas special. Get Great Western Trail. If you like heavy strategy games, you will really enjoy this one.
My mama cooks in Italy, mama swims in Argentina, mama's got a chunga, yeah. My mama's works in Venezuela, mama